Okay, so we're still discussing the eventual coming of the Messiah, the Mashiach, and today we're going to look at one of the metaphors and society. We're in the pre-Messianic era, which we said is going to lay the soil and make it fertile for the eventual coming of the Mashiach. So what we're going to see is the description of what it's going to be like before Mashiach comes. And we're also going to see that there are different opinions as to whether it's good to be alive at that time or not to be alive at that time. We're going to see some rabbis tell us that the best thing you want to do is be alive when Mashiach comes and see his eventual redemption. And there are other people that say, I'd rather be dead than alive because of the things that are going to be happening in the world before the eventual coming of the Messiah. Let's start at the top of the page with the Gaon of Vilna, and he gives a description of the intensity of the pre-Messianic era. Okay? So follow inside. And he says like this. The Geula, the redemption, is compared to as morning, b'shem boker. So if you want to know what the redemption is going to be like, redemption equals morning. Okay, that's the Geula, that's the redemption. And he brings a verse that says, the morning will come. Ki hala gam yalda. Oh, sorry, no, only one. The morning is like, it's going to come, it's like a redemption. However, the nighttime is what it's also referred to for the bad people. So it's called morning, but it's also called night. It's also called Laila. Who's that for? For the bad people. So it depends where you are, is how it's going to feel like for you. Okay? Why, we're going to see in a second. As well as that, as well as day and night usually referred to as bad and day is good, the other famous expression is that it's referred to birth. The birth. Right? And actually we'll see it's going to refer to as the birth pains, or you'll see maybe birth pangs of Mashiach. These are expressions that are used. Why? What are these expressions? Nighttime, daytime. Why are they using these metaphors to help us understand the coming of the Mashiach? Says the Vilna Gaon, it's like this. It's not just times of day. You'll notice that first of all, you don't just go from day to night or night to day. There's a process, right? First of all, it's bright daylight outside. Then it becomes afternoon. Then it becomes early evening. Then it becomes dusk. And then you have nighttime. But it's the same thing from nighttime to daytime. You don't just suddenly go from dark to light. Hashem, God doesn't do that to us. He allows our eyes to adjust. He does us a great favor. And the light comes gradually. First of all, you have early morning, right? Then you have Alot HaShachar, and then you have Nates, the sun comes from above the horizon, gives off a light, and then it moves up and up and up, then it becomes Ben Arbaim, then it becomes the sun's at the high point, middle of the sky, middle of the day. So there's a slow movement. Says the Vilna Gaon, that is why the prophets use the idea of nighttime and daytime to describe the coming of Mashiach, because first of all, it's light, and then first we have nighttime, extreme darkness, and then there's a slow movement into day as well. It's not one to the other. As someone said to me, whenever you see it go from bright light to complete darkness, quickly, you know a storm's coming. Right? That's what we want. We want a slow, gradual movement. So why birth? So he says birth, and this is the famous one, is a perfect metaphor for the coming Mashiach, because it's a slow process. It takes months and months and months, 9 months or so, 40 weeks of slow, and then it gets more painful and more difficult, and then it becomes unbearable, and then, I'm not trying to put you off getting pregnant, but then comes the screaming, and then comes the pain, And from absolute, potential death, it's a very hazardous experience to go through, right? Thank God today, less so, but definitely historically. You go from that moment of absolute death and destruction, right, to the most exalted, highest moment, the birth of a child. Right? That, says the Vilna Gaon, is why the rabbis, why the prophets describe it as night to day, as birth pains, because it's slow process, but the closer you get, the more intense it becomes, the more painful, and the more desperate. The more desperate it becomes. Hence, the birth pains, right? Going into active labor. Okay? Says the Vilna Gaon, that's why you'll notice, right before the end of the exile, the end of the galut, is the worst time. It's the intense night time. It's the birth pains right before the baby comes. He says at that time, we're going to see the world is going to be full with terrible, terrible things and atrocities, whether they be physical or spiritual. It's going to be a very challenging time. And we're going to see exactly what it means, but it means specifically also for the Jewish people, okay? And especially in the land of Israel. So we saw a couple of metaphors. We saw nighttime, daytime. We saw birth pangs. I'll give you one more, and this is the famous one, of which there's even a book by the name, and that is Ikvos Mashiach, which is called the footsteps of the Messiah. And that's actually how the Mishnah refers to right before Mashiach comes. The Ikvasei de Mashiach, the Akev is the heel, right? Meaning the bottom part of the foot, which is also an interesting metaphor why that part of the body was used to describe the society right before Mashiach comes. But that's the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah in Sota. And the Mishnah says, you're going to see a number of things. Now, this is a very unusual Mishnah. This is a checklist of what the world is going to be like right before Mashiach comes. Now, look at this. If you don't see at least some of these happening today, you've got to be living under a rock somewhere in Kabul, because it's like, which I don't recommend you doing, by the way, to be very clear, it's not a good place to be. Says the Mishnah, follow inside, note 2. The Ikvos to Mashiach, and by the way, we'll try to figure out why the heel was used, right? The heel or the sole of the foot is, the rabbis claim, as a pretty accurate definition of Rabbi Mashiach comes. But hold on, just keep that in your minds. I want to get back to that. So do remind me to give you at least one interpretation of why the sole of the foot is a perfect description for the end of days. Says the Mishnah, Be'ekvas Mashiach, chutzpah yisageg. You're going to have a lot of people with chutzpah. V'yoke yamia gefen, and the honor will decrease. Right? You have a lot of chutzpah, and it's going to be much less honor. The vine is going to give its fruit abundantly. You're going to have a lot of grapes, and with a lot of grapes comes a lot of raisins. No, a lot of wine, you're right. So you feel guilty there for a second, but you didn't feel guilty. You felt good about yourselves, right? The yayin beyoker, wine is going to be expensive. There'll be a lot of wine, or whatever that means. Malchut, the leaders, the malchut, the government, those who run the country, and here we could be describing any country, but specifically the land of Israel. What are we going to see among the leaders? Ta'apach laminus, they're going to become heretics. Ve'ein tochacha, and no one's going to give them any form of rebuke. So the leaders of the Jewish people are going to become heretics, non-believers. It's going to be led by a bunch of people who are not believers. This is a Mishnah from 2,000 years ago. Chloe?
What are heretics?
Non-believers. Those who don't have a connection to Torah, mitzvahs, and Judaism. Yeah? Beit Vad. Beit Vad, the places of scholars where people meet, academies, universities, I guess will be a modern day interpretation of that, and other places, Yeleznut, are going to be used for sexual immorality. Vahagalil, the Galil is where? Was the Galilee? Where's the Galilee? The north of Israel, the beautiful Galil. Yecharav is going to be destroyed. Vahagavlan, and the people who live on the borders, it's actually a discussion as to who this is referring to. But the Gavlan, those people who live, some say there's a place called the Gavlan, which we're not sure today what it is, but it's on the border somewhere. Some say no. It means the people who live on the borders. Yecharav is going to become desolate. The borders of Israel, whether it's the Gazan border, is going to have Jews kicked out, or the northern part, the border of Lebanon is going to be kicked out. There's going to be a desolation that's going to occur there as well. The people who live there, are going to go from city to city. They don't have anywhere to live, right? Because they're on the border. People on the border are the ones who are most risk of attack. So those people who live on the borders of Israel are going to be the ones who are going to end up having to go from place to place and begging for somewhere to stay, right? Which, whenever I read this Mishnah, reminds you of the time that the Jews from Gaza, not even the recent wars, but when they evacuated and forced the poor Jews over there to leave their homes, they were living like hand to mouth, place to mouth, you know. I used to go to a hotel, take groups to hotels, and they were like years afterwards, and they were living in these hotels. Very shameful, I'll be honest with you, right? How these poor people were like, you know, not able to relocate and given a chance to relocate, right? Whether referring to that or to wars that have happened or will happen, we're not too sure. Okay. Says the Mishnah, there's more to say about before Mashiach comes. And by the way, this isn't just a checklist. This is all going to somehow lead to what this is the coming of the Mashiach. It's all telling of coming Mashiach. V'chachamav sofrim tisrach. The wisdom of the learned will degenerate. Right? People who are past generation will be very smart. You're going to see much less wisdom, maybe more knowledge, but chachma, wisdom, is going to degenerate. The yerei chet, and those people who are fearful of sin, those people actually care about being Jewish and not doing the wrong thing, yimasu, they're going to become despised. You're going to hate them. People are going to, it's hard to believe, people are going to hate religious people. Hard to believe that, right? Right? You keep Shabbos like, oh my God. Like you believe in Hashem, you support Israel, you love Jewish people, oh my God, we hate you. That's the Mishnah. Not me speaking. Not only that, says the Mishnah, Va'emet nederet, truth will be lacking. Right? There won't be much truth. Actually, somewhere else, the Shulchan Aruch brings down, there will only be pockets of truth. It's going to be hard to figure out who's got the truth and who's telling the lie. Or maybe, in today's language, it's all truth. Right? Everything's good. There's no right or wrong. There's no milchik fleischik. It's all parav. Right? Na'arim Penei Zakenim Yalbinu. Youths, young people, put old people to shame. Right? Which for us is, yeah, sure. No, it didn't used to be that way. Young people used to have a lot of respect for their elders. We get a generation where the old people are going to be like old and we forget about them. And the new young people are going to be the ones who create society and really form society. This is prophetic. Right? Zakenim, not only that, old people, it's an olam hafuch, upside down world. Zakenim yamdu mibnei ketanim. Old people are going to stand for the young people. Used to be an old person walks in, the young people stand up. Like, no. You're going to have some 18-year-old right, billionaire, and the old people are going to be like standing, giving them respect. Upside down world. Ben Menovel Av, a son is going to revile, hate his father. A daughter, but Kama Ba'ama, is going to go against her mother, going to answer back and go against her mother's teaching and argue with her mother. Kala Bachamosa, and a daughter-in-law is going to stand up and go against her mother-in-law. Hard to believe that could be true, that the daughter-in-law has a problem with her mother-in-law. I don't know where the Mishnah went wrong with that one. Okay. Oivei ish va'anshe beito. A man's enemies will be the people in his own house. A lot of war and destruction in people's homes. I guess this is, some say, the breakdown of the family. Right? Children against parents. Daughter against mother-in-laws. You know, difference between in-laws and outlaws? Outlaws are wanted. And then the Mishnah says, my favorite statement, which we're going to investigate. The rest of it, kind of like, yeah, I got it. But then the Mishnah says something unbelievable, which is completely out of context, because everything to now is describing Israel, Jews, Jewish society, people of the world, right? Families. And then it says something really cryptic. Pnei dor k'pnei hakelev. Pnei dor k'pnei hakelev. The face of the generation, write this down, pull this one out, double click on this. The face of the generation is going to be the face of a dog. What's that? What's the Mishnah talking? This is Mishnah. It's not some weird, esoteric, cryptic, I don't know, piece of Kabbalah. But she's saying, you want to know what's going to be like when Mashiach comes? Face of the generation, face of a dog.
It's like the Snapchat thing.
So what? What did you say?
Do you know what Snapchat is?
Yes, I do know what Snapchat is.
So
Yes.
you know how you can change your face.
Oh, I see. He's saying you change your face.
There's a dog thing. It's very popular.
You know what? I've actually seen that. My daughters have been putting ears on for some reason and large doughy eyes. Hold on to that for a second, because every year I teach this one piece of Mishnah, and there's always something else happening in society that people relate to. This one piece.
With the dog?
With the dog, yeah. The face of the face of the dog. I'll give you first of all what the traditional commentators say, and then we're going to zoom forward, and if you want, we'll even visit Snapchat. I'm okay with that. I'm pretty with it. But let's see first of all what it's talking about. What is it? First of all, it looks like an insult, right? You know, you got the face of a dog. Well, is it an insult?
No.
Do people like their dogs?
Yes.
Yes, they do like their dogs, right? They do like the dogs more than their own children nowadays, yeah? Used to be dogs when I was like, right? Dogs now have replaced an entire generation, right? People don't bother getting married, right? They love dogs. Why? So let's talk about dogs for a couple of seconds. We can do the whole class just on dogs in Judaism, by the way. It's very interesting. But it can't be coincidence. It reached a point where everyone completely loves that, my little dog, you work a boo boo boo, right? You know, we love that dog. How do you say dog in Hebrew? Let's start with that. Kelev. Okay. And actually, Kelev, as those who've sat my classes before, is a contraction of two words, which are Kol Lev. Kol Lev. What's Kol Lev? All heart. All heart. What does that mean? Man's best friend. Loyal creatures. You know, the other animals give us so much. The cow gives us its milk and its skin, gives us leather, and the sheep gives us its wool and its milk, and we make cheese, all that. And where are they? They're out in the barn, right? The elephant moves stuff for us, and the oxen drag stuff for us, and they're in the barn, we like feed them. And the dog, what's he doing? Yip, 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 yip. Right? And he's by the table, and he's in bed with us. We're like, you're my little doggy, I love you so much, right? Right? Why? Because dogs are very loyal creatures. They have a trait, and in Judaism, jokes aside, they have a special status. Right? We know with Jews, very good. When we left Mitzrayim, what did it say? Right? Kelev lo yichris l'shono. The dogs didn't bark. Because of that, we throw tishlachol kelev. We throw to the dogs the korbanot, the leftover sacrifices. Why are we giving the great grandson of some dog from like thousands of years ago? Right? Whoa, that was a fantastic thing. Dogs didn't bark. It's not the dog itself. It's the trait of dogginess, if you will, that we like. Dogs are very, very... Here's my take on the whole thing. Ready for this? And you can Snapchat this if you want. Dogs are very, very loyal creatures. We're living in a generation that's very inauthentic. Right? People are false, they're fake. It's all on the surface. Dogs are very real creatures. They come in, they love you. Cats are like, whatever. Right? But dogs, you know, they're like warm, they're always happy to see you, very honest. They are... What you see is what you get with a dog. Authentic creatures. I believe that's why dogs have begun to replace real relationships. Because people aren't getting it from people. So you know what? I just buy a dog or 95 cats. You know, and I'll get my love that way. It's sad, really. Right? I'm not putting down dogs. People get very upset when I say this, like, but my dog, I can't love my dog, you know. Look, oh my friend, my dog, look so cute, look at the eyes, big ears. I'll share something else with you though. And this is Rav Chanan Vassman, and he says, let me share something else. This is not just talking about the generation, although I believe this to be true as well. Talk about the face of the generation. The face. What is the face of a generation? Who, I should say, represents the face of the generation of a society? Who's the face of society? The leaders. right? They're the ones who put their face forward. You get to, who are the people we see online? The famous people, yeah? And we see the face of the leaders, right? The politicians, people who run the country. They're the face. They represent, the face represents the generation. Says Hanavas, it's very, very interesting. When you see a dog walking, where does the dog walk usually? In front of the owner or behind the owner? Beside, possibly beside, but usually the dog, if it's off a leash, usually walks in front. Right? So imagine you were to home in, he says, on a scene. And you know, it's in a little thin book I have at home called Mashiach, the footsteps of Mashiach. Oh, we've got to go back to our footsteps. Remind me of that later. So he says, imagine you see the scene and the person's walking, the dog's in front. Now, if you didn't know what was going on, who do you think is leading?
The dog.
The dogs are leading, yeah? The dog's in charge, the dog's leading. Because the owner's walking behind. And you would keep thinking that until something happens. And that is the owner makes a left turn or a right turn. And what does the dog do? The dog turns its face, looks back, and then follows the owner. And then you realize, oh, they're actually in charge. He says this actually is a sign of what society is going to be like before Mashiach comes. You're going to think some people are leading, but they're not actually leading. They have the face of a dog, meaning that when they actually come along, says Rav Chana Wasserman, right, when they come along and you think the politicians are leading, actually they're not, society's telling them what to do. And they're just following the whims of what the people want, right? Some democratic reality. It used to be leaders or real leaders. They were in charge, right? They led either nicely, like great kings, or they led like dictators, but they were in charge. They were the judge, the jury, the executioner. He says, no, before Mashiach comes, they're just a face. Really, they look back, they want to see what the people want, and they're going to do what they basically are going to keep them in power and keep up what those behind them are actually doing. It's a weakening of the tops of society, and it's a burgeoning and a growth of the grassroots. And the leaders are not going to be leaders. They're just reflecting, because what does the face do? The face reflects what's going on inside. All right? When you look at a person's face, you know how they're feeling. If I walked in this morning and I was like, I'm having a good day. But if I walked in like this, I'm having a sad, how do you know? You look at the face. You don't look at the knee or my hand or my foot. The face reflects. The face reflects what's going on inside. Nachon? That's interesting why the Hebrew word for a face is a panim. We discussed this before, yeah? Panim. Panim is also pinim, inside. A face is facade. What's going on inside? That's what a face actually is meant to reflect. And here it does too. The face, these are a generation, are like the face of a dog. It's just going to turn around whatever they want. I'll give them. I'm not leading. I'm just following the whims of society. If they want to make this legal, I'll go with that. If they want to make this a permitted activity now, that's what they want, we'll give it to them. I don't have any beliefs, right? We have no real moral grounding. We'll just do whatever the people want. And if that keeps me in power, gives me rep. Shalom al Yisrael. Yeah.
A question regarding that. I know we said that the best type of leadership is kingship. However, wouldn't it be democracy and listening to what the people want? Because in those states, when people weren't educated as a whole, but if we're talking about it now, people are not.
Very good. Very, very good. Very good. Fair question. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Democracy is very, very good and has worked out very, very nicely, especially in the Western world. We're seeing that. That may not be, however, the perfect type of leadership that we see in society. And there's different types of democracy. Not all democracies are the same. American, we call it like democracy is good. Some democracies are not so, right? Japan is a democracy, which is very different to the British democracy and America. They're not all the same. I don't get into the political realities that go with this. But what I will say is that leadership has diminished, right? Because that's one of the victims that comes with that. Democracy is good. We're very blessed to have it. I think because of it, a lot of Jews are still alive today, thank God. Right? And a lot of the world is being, and we see the sides that don't have democracy end up being bad. But you've got to look from both sides, right? With that, there's pros and cons to everything, right? And we see that leaders are just going to do and follow the rules of society. If that's what most people want, and society wants that, then we'll just go with it. Because we don't have any principles, because we got to follow what everyone wants. But if everyone's getting it wrong, we get it wrong as well. I'm just saying this. There's always going to be pros and cons over there, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, we had your hand behind you. So 1 second. So sorry, yeah.
I was just going to ask about the Nutella concept.
Yeah.
In the Tanakh, a lot of people are compared to acting as a dog.
Yes.
Like a dog.
Yeah, yeah. So acting right. So there we see, the Gemara speaks about it too, that some acting as a dog is not always a good thing. Right? Dogs do certain things, they do it outside, do it publicly, yeah. So calling someone a dog is a bit of an insult, as it is today in society, you know. You're just like a cat, maybe not so bad. You're like a dog, not so good. Here it's not meant as an insult per se, it's a description, because it's following the rest of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is telling us what this idea of dog is. But I did hear a speech, a talk from a very great scholar, and she pointed out this idea that this inauthenticity that we're seeing today is really reflective of what this of the dog is. People are going to need real relationships, and they're going to turn to their dogs, you know. People actually must start to look like their dogs. You ever experienced that before?
Yeah.
When on the street and you look at, and someone's walking their dog, you look at it, you're like, it's uncanny, right? The same floppy ears, same funny hair, the same, like, you know, whiskers, same chin, right? People actually, I always say that it comes with a challenge, right? Because if you put on a love into dogs, you become like a dog, really. You know, you become that becomes your image of what, you know. It's problematic, you know. But dogs have good traits as well as negative ones, right? Yeah.
What do we say is the reason that a king is the best king of leaders?
What? We don't say it over here. We mentioned in the past. The idea of kingship is a Jewish concept. Having someone who leads. Now, there's, even in Judaism, we have checks and balances, right? The prophet tells the king, and most fights in Tanakh, in Jewish history, were the kings, who had a lot of power, and the prophet, who was the visionary, who was telling him, hey, you're overdoing it. So we've had a lot of trouble with the rabbis and the kings, right? The prophets and the kings. But the kingship, I mean, Mashiach's going to be a king. It's coming back. Coming back. Right? That's what we're ultimately going to get to, right? So that's what they were referring to, okay? But there's a part of this, Jessica, like you said, dogs also do a lot of things publicly, right? So you'll see in society before Mashiach comes, things that people would like barely do in the confines of their own home, suddenly be doing it for everyone to see. And when I say everyone, I mean like everyone. There's a lack of shame that comes with the dogginess as well, okay? And that's why it finishes off, right? And that's why people are ben ein mitbayesh ma'aviv. Children, one generation will be embarrassed of their fathers. Yeah. Ve'al ma yesh lanu l'shaen. Who are we going to rely upon? Al vinish b'shamayim. Right. In the end, we're going to only rely upon Hashem. Now, there's different ways to look at this. There's positive and negative. Some say that it's going to be so bad that I can't trust people, I can't trust society, I can barely trust my parents, right? And my kids are like whatever. So you're going to rely upon Hashem. And some say, well, actually, this is a good thing. That things are going to get so challenging that people are going to return to Hashem. And that coincides with the final prophecy of the prophet Malachi that Hashem is going to return our hearts, so that people are going to be searching and desiring for some kind of truth and some kind of emet. Yeah? So turn over the page, note 3. Oh, I didn't mention the heels. Well, what's the heel thing? So I read something very interesting, that why is the generation when Mashiach comes referred to as the heel, the ikr say Mashiach? So some say, well, footsteps are, when you see footsteps, you know someone's there. So it means close. So generally speaking, footsteps, it basically means we're close to Mashiach coming. But why that particular expression? Why heel? Right? Why not raglayim? I don't know, or something. So they say that, you know, different parts of the body have different forms of sensitivity. Right? Your finger has different sensitivity to your lips, which is different to your thigh, different to your back. But one of the least sensitive parts of the body that feels the least pain, right, is your foot, unless you step on Lego, and then the pain is excruciating, as one day you will discover. But besides, your kids leaving Lego out, the foot it's like the heel is like thick skin. It doesn't feel anything. So they say, I read this, that before Mashiach comes, it's going to be a very insensitive generation. It's going to be a lot to get through to them. They're not going to feel anything. They're numb. Right? We're going to be numb to so many things that are happening in the world. There's a numbness that's going to be in the world. However, at the same time, one of the least sensitive parts of the body, the heel, which is callous and thick, right, is also the most susceptible to what? to laughter? You tickle it. Right? You tickle a foot. So the same thing that can barely feel a pin inside it, you tickle it. So they say the generation when Mashiach comes is going to be like insensitive, right? But they will be, what they're like? They like to laugh. They like to have tickle-like sensations, right? As I like to call the Elmo tickle me generation, is what.
Does it say that in here?
No, it does not say that in there.
No, like on you, but not the Elmo part.
No, I did that outside. I read that elsewhere. I didn't bring it down. If you want, I'll show you a source for it. I heard it somewhere, and I read it somewhere. Right? Just like an insensitive kind of generation. But it's amazing. That same part of the foot that's completely insensitive, you just tickle it, it's like, yeah, we're laughing. Right? That's us. Right? For good or bad. You can figure that out, yes.
Shouldn't Yaakov kind of then be kind of like
Wow.
involved because Yaakov is your God?
Sarah's on it today. Yaakov. Yaakov has the name heel. Why? Because he held on to his brother's heel when he came out. He represents heel. He represents Mashiach coming. Now the body, say the rabbis, actually is a metaphor for all of Jewish history. It starts with Adam HaRishon, the head, and as you work your way through the body, you're actually going through 6,000 years of Jewish history, which would make sense that before Mashiach comes is the sole of the foot, which it makes sense that that generation will be the least sensitive, yet the most sensitive to a nice, have a little bit of fun. That's all we want, you know? Not very serious, just laugh a little bit and we're good to go. Yeah? Actually, I don't want to talk about it now, I was going to talk about it later, but I'll mention it now since you mentioned it. Laughter is the perfect metaphor. Actually, it's not mine. It is the metaphor for Mashiach coming. I'll say that again. Laughter is the metaphor. How do you say laugh in Hebrew? Schok. Schok. Alright? You know what? Let's do it now. We've got to tie this together. You asked it, but it fits in very nicely to what we're describing. Right? The laughter. Where do we see this? What is laughter? What generates laughter? What makes you laugh? What makes a joke funny? What makes my joke so hysterical that you love my joke so much and cannot wait for me to tell a joke every class?
Unexpected.
Something you don't expect. That's right. Now, if you expect it, it's not funny. That's why when your father tells a joke, you're like, Dad, you've told that 50 times. It's not funny anymore. All right? What makes a joke funny? What makes a joke funny is you didn't see it coming, and then there's a punchline, and it becomes funny. Actually, there's 3 parts that make any joke funny. And that's going to sound weird, but I have a whole lecture just on what makes laughter. It's all about Mashiach. 1, every joke has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I love this, by the way. I got a million to this. What? With me or someone else? Number 2, where? Not in this class? No. Be middle and end. Number 2, every joke has a punchline. Always. Every joke has a punchline. And number 3, and most importantly, the punchline must appear at the end and must be unexpected. If it's expected, it's not funny. I'll tell you a good one. This is cute. Listen, I heard this from my cousin, who's a big rabbi in the Mir in Eretz Yisrael. He's got a great sense of humor. Charlie Chaplin. Did you think I mentioned Charlie Chaplin in Mashiach class? You know who Charlie Chaplin is, yeah? So he was interviewed and he was asked once, what's the difference between American humor and British humor? Because he came from England, obviously, you know. And then he moved to America. And he said, what's the difference between British humor and American humor? And I'll tell you the difference. He says, American humor is like this. What do Americans find funny? You got a man walking along, and he's all smart, he's all dressed right? And comes along, and then there's a banana skin on the floor, right? You call this kind of banana skin? Yeah. Peel of banana. And then the camera goes from banana skin to man's face. Right? Man's face. Banana, man's face, right? And then what happens? And he slips on the banana, and he falls down, and he hurts himself, and everyone starts laughing. It's not funny. So why are we laughing? Because it's unexpected. You didn't expect that to happen. You don't expect to see some fancy person slipping up on a banana peel and then falling on the floor and being hurt. Right? I mean, but it's not, a person who's hurt, I don't care. Even the person who walks over to help pick them up is like, you know, helping them up. He says, that's America. In England, this is perfect, by the way, I love this. In England, it's the opposite. You see the same scene, a guy, banana skin, right? So the camera goes from banana peel to the man's face, right? And the guy sees the banana on the floor, and he steps over it, and he falls in a manhole. He says, that's British humor. See? It's just like one extra. Yeah? It's unexpected. If it's unexpected, it becomes funny. Even if it's not funny, someone's hurt themselves. Let me give you a couple of proofs to this. By the way, really, this is all of Jewish history. All of history has the beginning, middle, and end. Right? There's going to be an end to history. That's the punchline. And the punchline is unexpected, which is why you can't know when Mashiach comes. Because then you lose the whole punchline that goes with it. You with me? Then you lose the whole impact of the entire reality. Where do we see this happening? What do we see? Which Jewish holiday represents the coming Mashiach? Purim. Purim. Purim is a very messianic holiday. Right? And it follows the same thing. And that's why it's the laughing holiday. What's going on? We have a beginning. The Jews are being dispersed. Right? They've been in Galut. Right? 70 years. Achashverosh, I'm going to kill all the Jews. Yeah. I didn't see it coming. Then what happens? Someone called Esther, who is Nistar, Nistar, she's hidden, comes along and she saves the Jewish. Did they see her coming? No. The perfect punchline. What do? We laugh. It's not a funny story. It's a terrible story. Jews are about to be completely wiped out, and we weren't. That's not funny. Yet we laugh. Why? It's unexpected. Yeshuat Hashem, Karafine, Hashem's redemption comes in the blink of an eye. Purim is the metaphor, the perfect example of Mashiach coming. It goes one way, and then bang, it turns around. We're all about to die, and in 1 second, we're all saved. It looks like we're going to physical destruction and spiritual destruction, then we're saved. Purim is the Messianic holiday. Right? Which is why the Rambam says that actually all the holidays will end up disappearing when Mashiach comes. We won't need them. You're not going to need Pesach anymore, because that talks about the redemption from Egypt, and we've had a bigger redemption, Mashiach coming. So Pesach's actually going to go. Right, Yom Kippur. Good news, right? It's going to change. Tisha B'Av is going to have a happy holiday. The books of Tanakh, besides the Torah, won't be needed because they're talking about coming Mashiach. Mashiach said, we're not going to need the books of Tanakh anymore. Whatever that means. But he says, Megillat Esther, Tanat Esther, they're going to remain. Because they describe the Messianic era. There's something in that story that describes, that's what the Rambam says. He says that book will always be. The Megillat Esther, that is the blueprint coming Mashiach. How? I'm not too sure, but this is definitely one of them. Everything's going one way, and then it turns around in 1 second. That's Messianic. The birth. You're going from death to life in 1 second. Right? The baby's inside liquid, right? Inside the womb, and then it comes out, starts to die, and then everything inverts, and things that are open, close, things that are closed, open, and everything ends up reversing, and the baby starts to breathe for the first time. It lives a whole new existence. That's Olam Haba. Yeah? That's post-Mashiach. Can you see that, how it comes together? And that's why David HaMelech says, Shira Malot, B'shuv Adonai et Shivat Tzion haynu kecholmim. We should be like dreamers. Az Yamale Schog Pinu. What's Az mean? Az means then. Az means then. Sorry. Az means then. Az in the future. Aleph is 1. Zayin is 7. That's 8. Right? That's future. Az is always, when you say the word Az, it turns to the future time. Az Yeshid, then they sang. That means then they will sing. There's going to be a future. So Az Yimach, then our mouths will be full of. What's he talking about, David HaMelech? He's talking about when Mashiach comes. He says when the future world comes, then we're going to start laughing. Why? What's that? We're happy. Right? Then we're going to be, no. Right? Then we're going to laugh. Then we're going to finally understand how all of Jewish history is one big joke. Nachon? We're going to look back and it's all going to make sense. That's why they suffered over there. That's why we have to go to Galut. We're going to actually, now I get it. It's like the last page of the novel. Like the last scene of the movie. Now, I can go back and figure it all out. Right. What did Rabbi Akiva do when the Second Temple was laying destroyed in front of him? Anyone know this famous Gemara? Rabbi Akiva looked out the destroyed temple and he saw foxes and he heard the Romans cheer and celebrate. They destroyed the temple, they dispersed the Jews. What did Rabbi Akiva do? Everyone else was crying. All the other rabbis who were with him started crying. Rabbi Akiva laughed. He's laughing. So they said to him, right, whoever was there, Rabbi Yochanan, they said, why are you laughing? He said, why are you crying? It says, temple's destroyed. We've been kicked out. They destroyed our temple. All the Jews are being dispersed, being wiped out. He's like, that's why I'm laughing. Because in the future, third temple, we're going to get the last laugh. See, that's his greatness was, at that time, he saw the future redemption. David HaMelech knew it. He knew it. And so did Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu. What happened when Sarah found out she was going to have a child? V'titzchak Sarah, she laughed. When she saw Yitzchak, when she was pregnant, she laughed. And she got into trouble for that. At first, she got into big trouble. He says, why are you laughing? I didn't laugh. He said, did laugh. And then later on, what happens? She gives birth and she starts laughing. And it's a wonderful celebration. And then she names her child Yitzchak. Yitzchak. What's Yitzchak? Laughter. Yitzchak's name, Isaac, in Hebrew, Yitzchak means laughter. Actually, it doesn't mean laughter. It means will laugh. Very nice. Future tense. There's going to be laughter. Through that birth of creating Yitzchak, and by the way, his life was not a laughing matter. It's actually terrible, right? He went through challenges, he had to deal with his brother, and he had to give himself his life up, right? So that, Yitzchak's life, he became a korban, a sacrifice. His life becomes the metaphor for Jewish history. In the future will be laughter. Right now, he's like, yeah, Avraham Avinu, he probably laughed. He had guests, he was doing Kiruv, you know? Yaakov must have maybe laughed at what he was dealing with, but Yitzchak's he's gevura, he's strength. He's strength, he's gevura. And yet his name is laughter. It means a future laughter. When you see the end come together, all the harshness, you get to laugh. So laughter is the perfect metaphor for the end of days. Because we'll laugh. Then our mouths will be full of laughter. Actually, the Shulchan Aruch, this is a halacha, this by the way. This is a Jewish law that I've unfortunately broken many times, unfortunately. But according to Jewish law, you know you're not allowed to really laugh. You know when you laugh like so much like your ribs hurt? So you don't have to do that. You like to laugh because there's so much suffering in the world, it's terrible. Right? So you shouldn't be like, I mean, I think today we need to laugh a bit more. But that's the halacha. The Shulchan Aruch says. Your mouth should be completely full of laughter. It's like, there's a lot of bad things happening out there. And you're going to sit here laughing your head off? Well, yeah, sometimes I do. But you get the idea. Right? Because when Mashiach comes, then in the future, but then you'll be full of laughter. That's going to be the real laugh. Anything else of laughter we see? Hashem plays with the Leviathan, the Leviathan, and he laughs with it. Mitzachekito, it says he laughs with it. What that's about, what the Leviathan represents, that big fish. At the end of the day, it's going to be a Suda with the fish, the whole. Okay. Celebrate Purim differently this year, right? Okay, turn over the page, just do a little bit more. We have 10 minutes. That was a good detour. Thanks for taking me on it. I appreciate that. That was good. Okay. The Gemara in Sanhedrin seems to coincide with the one in Sota, and says, Av Rabbi Yochanan, Dor Sheben Davar Ba. You know what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? The generation comes before. By the way, I hope I'm proving to you this is it. It's imminent. I mean, are you seeing this already? Is this like, are you getting this a little bit? It's like happening. Are you not?
We're on the fifth now.
What? Third. Trois. Amri Rabbi Yochanan, Dor Sheben Davar Ba. Talmidei Chachamim. Mitmatim. We're going to see that there's not going to be many Torah scholars. Most people are going to be ignorant. Actually, I think the masses will have more, but real Torah scholars will be. Bashar Einehem Kalot B'Yagan. And for the rest, their eyes will fail through sorrow and grief. A lot of grief and challenges. V'anachat tzar rabot. There will be many troubles and evil decrees against the Jewish people. Gezer kashot netchad ba. V'arishona pekuda shnia meher lava. Each new evil will come, and it's going to be worse and worse and worse. Why does it have to be this way? What's the connection? Why do things have to get so bad? Why do you have to go through this whole labor process of birth? Ramush form, the ultimate redemption comes, right? Why do you have to, right? Bedima, right, ends up being, right, B'simcha. Why through tears, right? So Rav Dessler gives a beautiful interpretation. And he gives another metaphor of medication and inoculation. And he says it's known in the world of medicine, the healthy people are given inoculations, and what you do when you inoculate someone, you give them a weakened form of the disease, of an illness, and that basically gets the antibodies ready to fight off the disease. He says so too spiritually. He says sometimes it's necessary to inject yourself with extreme materialism, even at a time when good inclination is under attack from the evil, and when those bad things happen, suddenly it wakens up your defenses that you never knew were there. So you end up fighting off the bad by being inoculated with a little bit of the bad itself. Since it works medically and it works spiritually. There's some amount of inoculation that we are being given right now. We're not aware of it. We're being injected with a little bit of the bad antibodies, but that's going to help us fight off the real bad stuff if we ever get infected with it. And he says this is the reason that Adam HaRishon had to be sent to the Gan Eden. He was a spiritual being, but he ended up being in a physical world, okay? And that's the reason behind the test of the pre-Messianic era, right? That it's things going to be so bad that we're going to be able to fight back. Right? If we're all spiritual, we won't be able to take the fight. That's what he says. Deep idea, whatever he's saying, he's saying. He carries on. And that's another reason, note 5 on the next page. He says that's why all the travails of the pre-Messianic era is because, and this one, I think we mentioned this before, is because before Mashiach comes, you're only going to appreciate the good when you see bad. Okay? That's what he says. Od tam, ki efshar lelmod davar chiyuvei mebli lerot hahefech. We the last generation when Mashiach comes, we're going to like, oh, I get it. I don't know, maybe 3,000 years ago Mashiach came, like, okay, pretty equal. Right? It's like, it's good for us and it's a little bit better. He's like, no. They don't appreciate it. Only a generation that is so mired in schmutz, right, will appreciate and get a lot more out of the punchline, right, the end of the joke, the end of history, and will get a lot more out of it. And that's why he quotes Malachi that says, "V'shaftem v'iten ben tzaddik l'rasha." You shall return, and you'll see the difference between the righteous and the wicked. Right? So it's going to be very evident who's getting it wrong and who's getting it right. And he says, "Leolam et adam ruchniyot." A person does not learn spirituality. Ela imkein yitbareh lo, as it comes clear to him, ad kam hu atzmi mugsham, until he feels how physical he is. You only appreciate the spiritual, the light, when you've had darkness. Right? If you're outdoors middle of the day, and sometimes on a flashlight, you're like, okay, a little bit more light. But if you're in a dark room, and you can't see anything, and you're struggling, and everything's dark to you, and so, sometimes on a flashlight, by the way, is the light at the top of the iPhone that they turn on. Let me just translate that for you, right? When you turn it on, you see the light. Now I get to see. You appreciate the light when you're in darkness. So too we're in darkness before Mashiach comes. Right? That's the darkness of the pre-Messianic era, and that's the physical and spiritual darkness we're going through. Okay? And for this reason, he says, the pre-Messianic era, he says, the footsteps of Mashiach, right, are going to be a very dark time for our people. It may not be physically dark, but spiritually dark, emotionally dark, psychologically dark, challenges that our ancestors didn't know. And we'll finish with this last piece of Gemara, and that's why the Gemara says, they asked the rabbi, so, this is an interesting conversation, do you want to see Mashiach? And Ullah said, Yetei v'lach v'itei, let him come, but I don't want to see him. I don't want to be there when Mashiach comes. Weird, right? This is the great Ullah, right? Rabbah said, let him come, I don't want to see him. Yeti v'lo achmini, I don't want to see him. Rabbi Yosef said, Yeti, let him come, and I'm happy to be worthy of sitting in the shadow of his donkey saddle. Meaning, wow, it's going to be amazing. I just want to get a glimpse. I'm willing to sit in the dirt and the donkey's filth and just be there in order to see him. Some say, let him come, but I don't want to see him. The other rabbi says, I'm willing to be an ant just to be alive when he comes. Well, which one is it? Such a big disparity. Don't let me be alive. Kill me. So others like, oh no, just to be there. So what is this going on about? So one answer is before or right after. Right, before he comes, generally it's going to be so bad, there's going to be tremendous struggles, right? Holocausts and terrible things happening to our people, and genocides and killing and spiritual desolation. Right? I don't want to see that. But then Rabbi Yosef is saying, just to get a bit of it. That's why Abaya inquired of Rabbah, why do you want to see him? He says, because of the birth pangs, the bits before. My timer, ilam mishum chavishom Mashiach, the birth pangs. Right? We know how bad it is. And he said to Rabbi Elazar's disciple said to him, What are you going to do? How are you going to survive this time? So then engage in Torah. Ha-Torah v'ham gemilut chasadim. The only way to protect yourself at that time is with Torah and gemilut chasadim. And Rabbah said, I don't want to be there because my merits, because of the tremendous sin that will be available at that time, I'm going to lose my my merits because of it. All right. We did a lot today. Have a great day, and we'll pick this up, God willing, on Thursday. Thank you.
Okay.